Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome. So glad you are joining us today. We are going to have an awesome discussion about mental health and what that experience can be like for people on the autism spectrum. So, very, very important topic. Actually, mental health applies to all of us. And I think, obviously, the more we can learn, the more we can observe and potentially help others. Um, so, one thing I wanted to say up front today is this can be a sensitive topic. And so, if you have little ones, that you might want to shield their ears, or any other, if you're in a public spot, you might want to put some headphones on. So please, take a second to do that. And the other thing, I forget what the other thing was. Headphones, and hey, brains don't work all the time. All right, so I am Stacy Gable, and I am a mom of neurodiverse kids. I happen to be pretty well versed in mental health crises. My kids and I have 4 kids, and we were all talking the other week, and I think we've had 11 inpatient intake experiences between all the kids. So I have definitely seen my share of crises and struggles and things. And so my hope is today that we can all learn and grow and maybe get to some of that root cause, like why does some of this stuff happen? So anyway, enough of me. I'd like to introduce you to our esteemed panel of talkers today. First up, we have Haley Moss. And Haley is just an incredible person as I'm getting to know her more and more. She is a lawyer. She is an artist, a speaker, an author. She had just came out with a new book, which is super cool, and an awesome disability and autism rights advocate. And she also happens to be on the spectrum. So welcome, Haley, to
Thank
our
you so much for having me. Always a pleasure to get to join you. And I'm really excited to get to have this conversation because we know that mental health impacts many folks who are autistic, and also just how they experience mental health difficulties and differences can look a little and sound a little bit different than how our neurotypical counterparts do, especially for folks who are also multiply marginalized or have different backgrounds than I do as well. So again, when you hear me talk about mental health, I could do the best I can to reflect things that I've heard commonly echoed, but I can only speak to my own experience. So please don't take anything I say as well as a generality or assume that it applies to every autistic person, because the people that you love, or maybe even you, experience things differently because you have a different background than I do. And that's totally okay too.
Beautifully said, as always. Thanks, Haley, very much. I'm also pleased to introduce Dr. Ben Russell. Dr. Ben is also a super cool sweetheart of a person. He is the founder of Real Connections Institute, which is now part of the Positive Development Therapy company across the country. And I know his connection's dropping in and out, but he'll be back here in a second. He has been practicing for over 20 years, seeing, he really found his niche with kids and their developmental differences and learning differences. What I love is how beloved he is by the families that I'm talking to. It's always such a pleasure, Dr. Ben, to talk to families that have worked with you and to hear about their experience. And so anyway, he is a licensed psychologist, and he's going to have a lot of wisdom and be able to share some great thoughts today. So welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Stacy. It's great to be here with you guys. I'm here to learn from both of you.
Yeah, we're going to learn a lot today. So great. So for those of you who are tuning in, one of the things that I wanted to tell you is feel free to drop comments or questions in the chat. We will have a little bit of Q&A time at the end. So, feel free to do that. One thing to be mindful, though, is it is public. So if you have any comments and things, you may want to, you can reach out to us directly. So just be aware of that. And the other thing that we would love is if you would maybe introduce us to or share this with your followers and your friends. If there's anyone out there that you think could benefit from this conversation today, we hope that you will hit that share button and do that. All right, so I think that is it. Are you guys ready to dive in?
Always ready.
Always ready. All right, so let me set the stage just a little bit, okay? For people on the autism spectrum, obviously they experience things a little different. Haley, you spoke really well to that. And I think from what I see is oftentimes you can feel like disconnected from other people, and that can lead to some mental health struggles. And we'll unpack a lot of that in just a bit. But one statistic I came across recently that was really striking is the rate of suicide for those on the autism spectrum is over 3 times more than those who are not. And so there's a risk in this community that we need to be aware of. And I think that's also why mental health is part of maybe like a therapeutic intervention, how important mental health is when you're looking for some support for kids and, adults, etc. So I think what we'll start with today is what are some signs? What are some things that are, maybe typical, not typical, things that people can watch for?
I'd start with that. I think there's a lot of potential things. Sometimes it might not be what you expect. So it's always important to keep in mind your children's mental health and your loved ones, the people around you. One of the most common things that I see when there's a change and there's depression or anxiety increasing is a withdrawal. So really being aware of if your child or someone in your life has a shift and is withdrawing from interactions, checking in with them. Increases or changes in behavior are also a very clear indication. And oftentimes in my experience with children on the spectrum, the response is to kind of try to control the behavior, say there's a problem with my child's behavior and we need to address the behavior. But really what is usually happening is that there's some kind of trigger or change or increase in anxiety or in depression or something that's mental health related that's going on, and the behavior is more of a sign of that rather than just a behavior problem because your child's being naughty. Another thing that I was going to mention is changes in sleep patterns or eating patterns could be a clue that you want to check in on.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've been learning about too is of course we know anxiety and depression. PTSD is pretty common, and oftentimes I think PTSD can mask as anxiety, or it's anxiety and depression's like an outcome of PTSD. So I don't know, Haley, if you have any experience with that, or if you have any other thoughts on signs or things for people that are struggling.
Oh, absolutely. So I think one of the signs that we didn't talk about as well that seems, I guess, I'm not sure what the right way to say this is, so please educate me if I'm wrong, but sometimes it's that someone might also appear more autistic than you're used to. So a lot of us have to develop all sorts of different coping strategies to mainly get through the day, especially when we're young. We're taught from a very young age about masking, right? Like this idea of kind of trying to gain this social acceptance by appearing more neurotypical, by doing certain behaviors and suppressing certain traits so that we aren't bullied, which is something that can be very traumatic. It can lead to lots of anxiety. I think that when you see less of that masking sometimes, and especially in younger folks, you could realize maybe something's going on that they don't have the mental energy to do this thing that is harmful in the first place, but they're taught to do from a young age, or they're doing out of survival. And I say out of survival because it's really true for a lot of people who are marginalized by gender and race. We do it to avoid harassment. We do it to avoid difficult police interactions, sexual abuse, sexual assault, all sorts of other different reasons. So I really wanted to draw attention to that as something that you might see. And probably one of the biggest ones that I always noticed, at least whenever I was really stressed or I was beginning to have anxiety or my mental health wasn't where I wanted it to be all the time, is I would lose interest in the things that I really enjoyed. And if you know any autistic people in your life, you know that we absolutely love and are beyond passionate about the things that we care about. And you might have heard the term special interests thrown around quite a bit. And when you see that withdrawal from your special interests, let alone other social interactions, that's usually pretty telltale. So for me, when I was really going through stuff, or I was very stressed, or I didn't feel like myself, I would stop drawing and painting. And that would be kind of this clue that something wasn't 100% with me. Is, okay, what's going on that Haley doesn't want to create right now? Is that there must be something else, whether it was that I was just stressed out with school, whether I was having difficulties with my friends and that was impacting my mental health, or there was some major life change on its way. Because I think that when we talk about mental health, we have to realize it's not just isolated to these big categories either. It's not just anxiety, depression, and PTSD diagnoses. It could be just things that we experience in life. And as we know, change, I think Dr. Ben did a great job speaking to this as well, is that change in routines and stuff is a really big anxiety trigger for autistic people too. So I would love to get to talk more about that. And also keep in mind with our youngsters, they might not have the vocabulary to say, Mom, Dad, trusted human being, I am anxious, I am depressed. They might just tell you that their stomach hurts. And that might be their way of saying, I feel queasy because I am anxious, and they just don't know how to say, I'm anxious. Just remember, a lot of people do struggle with things, and they might not always have the words for it, especially young people who might not have that background or life experience to go, oh, I'm anxious today. They might just go, my stomach hurts, I want to go to the nurse when they're at school.
Oh my gosh, that is such a great point. It reminds me when my kids were little, we had one of those like, how do you feel today kind of posters. And, they would use pictures and point to maybe, faces of how they were feeling. But gosh, yeah, not having the words to describe is a really, really good point. So, the other thing, as you guys were talking, that I see sometimes is, some of the kind of the avoidant behaviors, basically being on your phone, nonstop, or, gaming. I think also, I mean, not that gaming's bad, because I love it. And I'm not one in that camp that is anti any of that at all. But when you are doing activities and you're not, I don't know, being mindful or not stepping away from that, what are your thoughts on some of that avoidant kind of behavior?
So kind of like escapism in a way?
Yeah.
I am someone who escapes into things because I don't want to always deal with certain feelings.
Totally.
So it's something that I'm very mindful of. Is I'm one of those people, at least in my adult life, when there are things that I find really difficult, I throw myself into something I'm either really passionate about or work. So that explains why some people will be like, you just work really hard. And it's like, well, I don't want to handle or sit with this particular negative thought or crisis that's happening in some other aspect of my life for too long. So I remember that even when there was a death in my family and I was in law school, I was told to just apply myself more to law school. And that's what I did because I thought that's what you were supposed to do. And of course, we all know that grief in particular is a very different topic. And I'm sure we can have a whole other live about that in particular. But even just throwing myself into something kind of made it that I didn't feel things or really process that emotion. And I think that is something that autistic people and people in general might do, in that avoidant or just escaping really deeply into special interests, so they don't have to face the fact that maybe they're lonely. Maybe they're struggling socially more than they would like to admit. Maybe that they're really anxious or they're throwing themselves into the special interest because it might be the only way they're getting away from that feeling and anxiety about maybe being bullied in school. So I think how we look at that is very much case by case. For some people, maybe spending a lot of time playing games or something like that is completely typical of them, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if it's something that seems very out of the ordinary for that person, I think it's worth investigating maybe why is this happening? Not that it's horrible that they're playing games, for instance, but maybe there's a reason they're purposely playing more games than normal.
Yeah, well said. And I think too, I mean, it's a coping mechanism too. And that is a great thing. I think I'm wondering, Dr. Ben, what your thoughts are like on maybe when are things like, I guess that unusual behavior, if something's really different, that's when you should kind of pay attention.
Yeah, what I would like to add is the point that I think you both made, that having those coping strategies and being able to move away from something when it is overwhelming is a healthy mental health tool. And actually, what I would say is a great sign of somebody's mental health, like healthy mental health, is being able to both move towards emotion and interactions and connections, and also be able to move away and have the flexibility to do so in an organized, functional way. So in some situations, it's helpful to have some space and time for yourself, or just tune out and game for however long is healthy for you. And in other situations, it's more functional to move towards the emotion and allow yourself to feel it, allow yourself to talk to somebody about it, get to express it, and process the feeling more actively. And sometimes it's not the right time to do that. Sometimes, is like needing to fix it can be a sign of anxiety and kind of a need to control, because you're overwhelmed by the anxiety and the instinct is to fix it. So in that case, it might be good to take some time to yourself and feel it, and learn to let go. But to always be avoiding, or to be over avoiding, and not to be able to allow yourself to create the internal room to feel emotion and feel the feelings of difficult times, whether it's grieving or anxiety or changes in your life. That's really one of the key signs of mental health.
Can I actually ask a quick question speaking to that? Just because I know this probably affects a lot of autistic people as well, is this concept of like alexithymia, where people might not be able to identify these feelings that they're having. So how does that kind of fit in? So maybe they're avoiding something, or maybe they don't realize it because they can't identify exactly what it is they're feeling, but they might know that something is off, or they might just think this is part of just existing. But what happens when we have autistic people who might struggle to identify those feelings of anxiety or depression, or that something is off in their lives?
And of course, that's the moment. Dr. Ben, there you go.
Okay, get an extra second to think about it.
Yeah, hopefully I heard the question. I was thinking about the same thing when Stacy was mentioning the emotion pictures, because we use that sometimes, but it's really difficult for some kids, and it becomes like a stress, because I can't differentiate between these feelings. So there's a few steps to learn in order to be able to differentiate between feelings and develop self-awareness. And even before you can have the language, or even be able to point to a feeling or even, identify, well, what do those pictures represent? You need to be able to internally differentiate between different feeling states. And that's something that, infants can't do, and develops and continues to refine over time. And, as an adult, I continue to further differentiate, what are my feeling states? And there's a lot of different versions of frustration that mean different things and indicate a different functional response. But just on a basic level of learning to identify, what is anger, what is worry, what is sadness. If those feeling states are undifferentiated, then they become overwhelming to the child, and they can't organize a functional response. They obviously can't organize communication of, I'm sad right now because mom went to work. It's just like this feeling is overwhelming them, and the connections are not able to be put together. So they need patience and understanding, seeing that they're demonstrating their internal world. They're not acting out because they're resistant or naughty or lazy. They have these undifferentiated feeling states, and so they need caregivers to recognize that you're feeling something. Let me come alongside of you, support you, and help you make sense of it. And caregivers that can narrate what they observe in their body, what they, what it might be connected with. Oh, mom left, and now like you're having a really hard time. I wonder if you're sad that mom left. So, pictures may or may not be helpful for an individual. Narrating it may or may not be helpful for an individual. So it's also, what is a way that this particular person on the autism spectrum best takes in information and best can relate that information to their internal sense. So it's not consistent for everybody. We really need to get to know your child's way to process the world and best way to make sense of things, and use those to help them begin to express and understand and differentiate their own feelings.
Yeah, and I hear that, Dr. Ben, and I think as a parent, when it's like high stress, there are behaviors, and of course, these behaviors can be the attempt to communicate. And, you're just in the moment like, oh my gosh, why are we having a meltdown? This makes no sense. I'm wondering if you guys could talk to, I think actually how it feels maybe. And Haley, I'd really be interested in your thoughts on this, but how that feels internally. Could you describe that at all? So like, we could maybe understand a little bit, how some of these feelings can feel to you.
I feel like feelings, I think I know what you're saying. So I think feelings, at least for me, are very intense. And there was actually something when we were talking about identifying feelings that I think it would be really great to get to share with everyone, because I actually got to review a new workbook for teen girls on the spectrum. And there was this thing called an emotion wheel on it. And it started with these broad categories of feeling, like happy, sad, angry, blah, blah, blah. And then you went up the wheel, and then it explained, like, maybe when you said that you're angry, you're frustrated. Or maybe when you're sad, you're lonely, and you kept going up until you hit a more detailed feeling. So it helped explore your vocabulary and what you were actually feeling in those realms. That was something that I'll have to show everyone a visual later of, but it was so great. And I found it really helpful in my adult life, because I'm like, oh, maybe I think I'm sad, and that might be the word that seems most appropriate. But really, when I look at this something else, this seems more in line with what I'm really feeling. And I just didn't think of it in the moment because I was so desperate to communicate that. So I think going back to what things feel like, at least for me, feelings feel very intense. And you were talking a lot about meltdowns earlier, and I kind of want to actually expand on that, if that's okay. Is I know that for parents that meltdowns are very, very stressful, and they're even more stressful for us. And what compounds that stress is that we know that we're stressing you out and that you're worried, and it's like this big spiral of anxiety going on for everybody involved. Because I know every time that I've had a meltdown, I've always tried to hold it in, wait until I was alone, because I didn't want to stress someone else out. And then I would be in the middle of a crisis, basically, or feeling like my body was in a crisis, because a meltdown feels like a crisis. That's the best way to describe it. I know that's kind of not the best vocabulary of choice right now to say it, but it really is a terrible feeling. It's not a temper tantrum, which I really want to distinguish. It is a complete loss of control, that your body is fighting to kind of make do with its environment, that things aren't going the way it should. There's so much stimuli coming in, and your body just can't fight it anymore, that all of a sudden it's like the anxiety, the crying, the screaming, the absolute whatever is going on with the person's body. And when that happens, I think it's really important that we know what might have triggered it. We might have that discussion later when the person's calm. But more importantly, it's crucial to make sure that person is safe. So if there's other people around, you want to make sure that they know that the situation's under control. If you or the autistic person in your life needs hugs at that time, if they need a quiet space, if they need to be alone, everybody has a different strategy to get through it, because sometimes you just need your body to come down, and other times you just want your parents to give you a hug and tell you it's going to be okay and kiss your forehead. So every single person is very different. I recommend that if you have kids that are able to explain themselves, or autistic people in their lives who are aware of what's going on when everybody is calm and it's not right after the fact, you maybe have a discussion of what feels good for you or how can I help. Not the, oh my gosh, it's so stressful for me, because that contributes to the guilt and shame of having a meltdown. It
Totally.
sucks having meltdowns. Take it from me. It sucks having them when you're a kid. It sucks having them when you're a teenager. It sucks having them when you're an adult. It's just not fun for anyone. So I think having that discussion when everybody is calm and saying, hey, that was really stressful for everybody when that happened. I'm so sorry that happened to you. How can I support you? So when that happens again, or if it happens again, everybody feels safe. I think that's a conversation that we should open as a team. So that way we know what to do. And that also comes to having kind of a crisis plan for your family or something like that. So, okay, if this happens in a public place, we're going to do this. If this happens at home, we will grab your weighted blanket so then you can calm down, whatever it might be for that human being. Everybody's different here. Some people love being touched during that and it helps them calm down. Other people absolutely hate it. Some people just need to be alone and hide under a blanket. Just know every single person is different and have that conversation when everybody feels like they're in a better place.
Boy, there was a lot of wisdom in what you just shared. And I just want to unpack that for days. And we will definitely.
Maybe we'll have to just have a discussion about meltdowns completely separately, but they are related to mental health sometimes, and especially when there's nothing left in you to keep fighting the environment you're in. Or same with sensory overloads. All of that stuff is very connected, at least if you ask me.
Yeah. Dr. Ben, anything that you want to add there?
Yeah, thank you. I said that I was here to learn from you guys. And that's certainly happening. In all of the work that we do, or that I personally supervise, the number one thing that Haley explained so well is the need for safety and trust. So, I just wanted to reiterate that and highlight how important safety and trust, emotional safety in particular, but all safety in any sense of the word, is for mental health, is for these moments. And there, as parents, you and I both know, Stacy, when your child's having a meltdown or a difficult behavior, or, in some kind of withdrawing, and they feel distant, it's stressful as a parent. So it's very difficult to organize yourself in that moment and provide the safety, provide, the kind. Mm-hmm. Those are the most difficult moments, are also the most important. So to learn to remind ourselves of that and develop our own tools. So, certainly, everything that Haley said was incredible about the importance of listening to the individual's tools. And it's also important for caregivers and parents to know what are their own tools, to be ready for those situations, to not become reactive and increase the anxiety and the meltdowns and the difficulty all around. Sometimes the child starts to have a meltdown, then the parent goes into meltdown, and the child's meltdown, gets lost, and they don't get the support they need because it's so stressful for caregivers, for all kinds of reasons. The other two things that I just wanted to differentiate out a little bit is and it is certainly consistent with what Haley said, but also to build on, is it's not the same every time that you have a meltdown. Sometimes you need a room all by yourself, and sometimes you need a lot of pressure, and sometimes you need music, and sometimes you need a distraction, and to just go, work on your homework or something. So just because getting a hug works 90% of the time doesn't mean that it's going to work 100% of the time. So that understanding that sometimes you need something different than other times. And then from talking to individuals on the autism spectrum over the years, another thing that I've found that is extremely helpful is music. And so I, just would always try to highlight that as a possibility. It's not always something that we think of, and it may be really helpful.
And the listening and the playing of.
I love music, so I have no objections to that whatsoever. Music is the thing that I feel like I stim to all the time, so love music. Glad that was mentioned because it's not something that comes to mind immediately in meltdown world to me. To me, it's just, okay, how do I make sure I'm somewhere quiet, safe, and that if this is in public, that my safety physically is not in danger because somebody doesn't know what's going on. That's what I think about for all autistic people, not just for me, but I know that to the casual observer who has never seen a meltdown and doesn't know autism the way that we do or our family members do, it looks really scary. It looks like someone might genuinely need mental health intervention or inpatient care. They just don't know. So that's why I think it's also important for parents and caregivers and loved ones alike to have kind of that sense of self-advocacy for them and advocacy on behalf of the individual who's currently experiencing that meltdown to say, everything is okay. I have this under control. Even just that little tiny script is enough to say, please don't get psychiatric services or law enforcement involved because that could possibly be dangerous in this situation because they might also not be equipped to deal with an autistic meltdown. There are plenty of autistic people who have gotten harmed even more because a well-meaning person who didn't realize what was going on asked for help and it was not appropriate. So it is very important that we have those advocating with the people we love moments, even when it's really, really stressful and really hard, because at the same time, that could be literally life or death for people too. It's important. And I know when we were talking about statistics earlier, I also feel it's almost imperative to mention that the autistic lifespan is a lot lower, that the average lifespan, there's been statistics throughout the years, is about 36. And a lot of that is because of brutality. It is because of suicides in mental health crises and things like that too. So how do we make sure that we're protecting our people, that they aren't harmed by either their own actions, their own mental health, or people who request help and interventions that don't end up helping the people who do need help, but not that kind of help?
Even when doesn't seem to be a matter of life or death or physical injury, or not that those things aren't much more common in the autistic population, but even when it doesn't seem like it's going to that level, those experiences and just experiences within a meltdown itself can lead to PTSD because it can be very traumatic and just further complicate mental health challenges when you have difficulty with anxiety leading to meltdowns that then leads to trauma, and then the trauma also needs to be unpacked. So I really agree with Haley.
And a meltdown at times can actually feel like life or death because you feel that it feels kind of like a panic attack. I guess that's the best way to describe it. And that's the version of it that most neurotypical people can kind of relate to, because there are people who aren't neurodivergent who've had panic attacks before. They know that kind of loss of control, the heart rate, the crying, the feeling like they're going to die or crumple on the floor type feeling. Is that tightness, that same feeling, is a feeling that is part of meltdown experiences too. So that's kind of the easiest way to describe what it physically feels like sometimes, other than a complete loss of control, because these are very involuntary responses. Nobody actively chooses to have a panic attack. Nobody actively chooses to have a meltdown. They're not fun. They're not trendy. They don't make anything better for anybody involved. And of course, I know this shouldn't be something I have to say as well when we talk about trauma and meltdowns, but there are often videos that end up on the internet from parents who are well-meaning and meaning to educate their kids of their kids having meltdowns and stuff. Please, I love you guys, and I know you mean to do well, but it's a huge privacy violation. Also, meltdowns are really traumatic, and our trauma should not be shared throughout the internet. I understand that you're trying to educate people, but also this could be really harmful for many, many different reasons. So please try to be respectful of your child or loved one's privacy unless they actually give you consent to maybe share something like that, because these things are really stressful for everybody, even though you might think they're teachable. And I understand the intent here, but also I think it's important that we do respect our loved ones no matter what. And I feel like it's very traumatic, especially for autistic people who see this kind of content floating around autism land. And I know that some people find it validating to know, like, okay, it's not just my kid, but for most autistic people, it's very traumatic to see, because you see other people in pain and their pain being shared widely.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I feel the need. I want to take a deep breath here, because this is hitting home a lot. And I wondered if we could talk for a sec. Just, we talked about tools, but, in the moment where things are amping up, things are getting scary, what tools can we employ to maybe help, regulate ourselves a little bit in order to help somebody else?
Yeah. Well, again, it is individual. And so when I'm working with caregivers and with family members, I always start by asking them, what is helpful for you? What are the tools that you find calming in your life? And some people are already able to identify that. Some people, it's not a way of thinking for everybody already. And so you have to start to problem solve and say, well, when do you feel calm? Or what, like after a long day, what do you do for yourself? And some people need to learn new tools. And neurobiologically, there's certain things that we know are very helpful to calm the system and get the system back into a better balance. Music is actually one of those things, and rhythm is really an important factor in regulating the brainstem. And so it can be very powerful to use something with rhythmic movement or music or combination of both to regulate yourself. And that can be a nice tool, because sometimes, I'm like, when I'm getting stressed and I'm working with a child, I think of music, we're able to find music that the child enjoys. I find it also regulating for myself. So it can be a great tool in that way. And I'll move and find the rhythm. And that in itself, again, is regulating for both of us. I have, parents have related to prayer, kind of chanting or making sounds, the creating of kind of the chanting or humming is very calming to the nervous system, and will get irritated nervous system back in balance faster. Just paying attention to the breath, feeling the body, bringing your attention into yourself, into your body, and holding that attention there brings the system back into balance. There's a lot of mindfulness strategies that are taught in cognitive behavior therapy or in mindfulness practices that are extremely helpful. And so, we try out things and find what works for us as an individual. But then, knowing that and having those go-tos to say, okay, let me take a deep breath. And once you learn that you can recover, what I find is that it takes sometimes a few minutes to recover when you're first learning to use these tools under stress. But as people learn, okay, I just need to take a breath, take a couple minutes, and then I'll recover, then their system actually learns, like, oh, I'm going to recover. It's going to be okay. I don't have to continue to engage in this stressful interaction. When I give myself a minute, I'll be better, and then we'll have a more productive resolution. And then once your system learns that, you start to recover faster and faster, to the point that you can maybe say, okay, things are going to be okay. And you don't even go into as much of a stress response. So it is really helpful to practice and for your system to learn that and expands your stress tolerance. It expands your range of affect and emotional experiences that you can have in your life, so that your whole life also becomes richer.
Well said.
Is there like a quick mindfulness exercise that maybe we can learn right now? Because I feel like this sounds great in the abstract, but what's something like very practical that we could do right now? So I guess that's where I'm coming from. Is like, is there a certain breathing technique we can maybe practice? Is there a very specific thing? Because I know like some people might talk about things like box breathing or other ways to kind of recenter yourself and kind of put yourself at ease. So is there like a certain thing that maybe we can try or do as a takeaway and kind of have that visual to go along with it, so folks at home can be like, oh my gosh, if I'm stressed, I could do this particular thing and it will make things feel maybe a little bit better?
Yeah, I would love to share one because today, over the lunch hour, I joined. Do you guys know about Clubhouse? It's basically like a voice social media thing. So it's just people talking. So I dropped in a room that was doing a meditation exercise, and she talked about breath. It was a lot of breath work, and how, especially like I was a theater major, so like you get nervous and you just breathe really shallow. So I even taking that deep belly breath, that is one thing to try to slow my breathing down, that can really help. But box breathing, I don't know, Ben, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Well, box breathing is just either picturing a box, or if you have a square, any kind of rectangle, like just a box shape, and you can do it where you trace with your finger. Yeah, you can trace the, is that how you guys do it? So the in breath and then the out breath, and the in breath and the out breath.
So breathe in, count, on 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, and exhale for 4 counts.
You trace that shape like it goes.
Yeah. So there's
out, like, and you end up with that box.
Okay, that just made all the sense in the world because I've always thought of it as a triangle, and so now I understand the box. So thank you, Haley, for that visual.
I need everything to be visual, so that's why I tried. I hope it showed up nicely for everybody at home.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've seen it taught many different ways. One of the things that that you guys mentioned is that it sounded like you were saying that the out breath was a little longer than the in breath, and that creates a neurological effect of calmness. Your brain is getting information from the pacing of your breath that things are okay, because when we get stressed, we increase our breathing, and our out breath is quick. So by purposefully making the out breath longer, you're telling your own system that you're okay. And so counting whatever the count is for the in breath, counting that, and then adding another second or two to the out breath. And at first, it might feel like 4-second out breath feels long, but as the system calms down, you'll notice that the out breaths can get longer and longer, and you can have, 15-second out breath can start to feel very comfortable, and then your system is really calmed down. Also, another very powerful strategy is to imagine breathing through the heart, and just imagine the air coming in and out through the chest and through the heart. And so you're paying attention to this area of your body, in the center of your body associated with the breath. And you can still, of course, do the out breaths as longer. And it has a very powerful neurological effect to calm down the system.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Brilliant minds. Brilliant minds. Well, I know we're kind of getting toward the end of our time, but I just wanted to invite anybody, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to use the comments. I know that there have been some great comments and people sharing, and Haley thanking you and saying go Haley. So anyhow, just wanted to give you a second to maybe drop some questions in at the end here. Okay, so we've talked about some good practical stuff here at the end. One of the questions I think we should discuss is just tools and resources. Like if people are in crisis or really struggling, what should people do? Any takers?
I think the easiest thing to say is to reach out for help, but people don't always know what that means. So sometimes you might not feel comfortable talking to an adult in your life. Maybe you're afraid they're going to judge you. Maybe you want to seek out help with something like counseling for the first time because it might not be an imminent crisis, but you realize that something is off. So there's all sorts of great ways to get help with counseling. So there's all sorts of telehealth options as well if you're someone who doesn't feel comfortable leaving the house, or you also need to save money depending on what your insurance situation is, that there is teletherapy if you want to speak to a psychologist that way. And of course, no matter what, there are all sorts of resources for suicide prevention and the helpline, which I'm hoping we're going to throw that information out for everybody so that you can have a visual of where to call for 24/7 crisis support. And if you are having a serious medical emergency, definitely call 911. So I think that's kind of the very bare bones of it, but I'm pretty sure that there are many different resources, and I think Dr. Ben can probably speak to this a little bit better than I can.
Yeah, I mean, what I would add to that is to seek like the resources that are in your life that you find helpful. So like looking for spending time with the relationships that you find safe and trusting, groups of people, getting regular exercise, having a healthy diet, getting good sleep are all like critical. Each of those things is just as effective as medication and helping depression. And those are practical things that you can do to support yourself in your day-to-day life. So staying connected to loved ones and taking care of yourself is huge. There are, support groups for all kinds of things that are often free and really and run by volunteers and really helpful. So depending on what area you're struggling in, to look for some generic supports, and of course, find a therapist or a support group in your area if you need sort of another level of support to process trauma or to like get yourself out of some difficult times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I also want to add to that is that you might also have an autism-specific support group that might also be touching on some of these issues because, as we know, anxiety for neurotypical people might look a little bit different. It might not be the same triggers. It might not be the same sensory profile. It might not also be the same social difficulties and other things that lead autistic folks to be anxious. So if there's an autism-related group for supporting you, or also just neurodiversity affirming resources or clinicians that are able to help you, definitely look for that as well, because I know for a lot of people it can be very frustrating having to also do that extra labor of explaining to a professional why you experience things differently because you're autistic. That does not sound like fun. It sounds like extra work, and especially when you're in the middle of something very difficult, you probably don't want to do.
Yeah. And, I think one of the things that I've gotten out of today is just how important it is to be aware and to learn. I think it's always important to hear the actual voices of people on the spectrum to learn from. I mean, that is so important. We should not be speaking for anybody. We should be listening. And I think, just helping to step in and advocate as much as you can, that is so important and so needed. So anyhow, I also just again want to thank people for comments. We will be posting some of those resources in the chat. So we'll get there maybe as soon as we wrap up. Mm-hmm. But I guess one word that I was thinking about earlier about all this and about mental health, and it's like, yeah, I wish things could be better. I wish people didn't have to struggle this way or wouldn't struggle this way. But I think the thing for me that I would love as maybe a parting thought is I hope that we all can have a moment of courage and just take a step to do something different. If you are struggling, our heart definitely is with you. Not
And you're not
alone.
alone.
You're not alone.
I think that's a really important thing to also throw in here. I don't mean to interrupt you whatsoever. I think it's important for folks to know that they're not alone, especially autistic people, because it's very easy to go through being a young adult on the spectrum or an adult on the spectrum and think you're the only one because you might not have had access to meeting peers who are also autistic. You might not have had someone who had similar life experiences because of the way that you think and navigate the world. So I think it's really important that you know you're not alone. And I think we're going to talk about this on our next live as well as about autistic community and autistic joy, is that our pain and the fact that things are very difficult for us is not the only thing that matters, and it's not the only definition of who we are or the identifying feature of being autistic. So, and there is a place for you in this world, and you are loved, you are valid for who you are, and you deserve to be cherished and respected, and sending you nothing but solidarity.
Yes, my heart's exploding. Yes. And, really, with these live streams and stuff, we want to help connect you. Yeah, we will look for opportunities. If you have any ideas on things you'd like to talk about too in the future, feel free to drop them in the comments. We're always willing to listen and maybe have some of those conversations. All right, y'all. I appreciate you both so much. And I thank you for your vulnerability and sharing, today, and for your wisdom. And I think that we've all learned a lot today. So thank you. All right. So everyone, I hope that you can join us next time. Stay tuned and keep connected here on social media, and we'll let you know kind of what topics are coming up. But, if there's anything that we can maybe do to help, please reach out. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.